welcome and thank you for joining us for today for our fifth and final webinar in the 2025 CSCC Fall Webinar Series. My name is Raina Dyer-Barr, and I serve as the Director of Community College Research and Engagement in the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. The University of Pittsburgh School of Education is the home of the Council for the Study of Community Colleges. Today's webinar is being presented by our 2025 CSCC Double Diamond sponsor, the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, OCCRL. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All mics have been muted, and I'll ask that you remain muted for the duration of the presentation, as this presentation is being recorded. You can unmute to participate in the question and answer session at the end of the presentation, or you can drop any questions or comments in the chat. With that, I'll turn it over to today's presenters to introduce themselves and tell us about their research.
All right, great. Thanks, Raina. Welcome everybody to this webinar. We'll go ahead and put our slides up. As you know, this presentation is entitled Toward Equitable Transfer Pathways in Illinois. This work is sponsored and supported by the Office of Community College Research and Leadership in collaboration with the Illinois Community College Board, the Illinois Board of Higher Education, and the Illinois Governor's Office. So today, what we want to do is talk a little bit about OCCRL, just give you a preview. I know I see a lot of familiar names, so it's good to see folks, but those of you who may not be familiar with OCCRL, I'll talk a little bit about us and what we do here. Then I'll present the research team who are on this project specifically, and then we'll go into, I'll talk a little bit about the policy framework that this particular presentation was, presentation research was developed from. And then I'll turn it over to our esteemed colleagues who will talk through the findings, come back to talk a little bit about our recommendations moving forward, and then we'll have time for questions from you all on the call. So a little bit about OCCRL. So if you're not familiar, OCCRL was founded in 1989 by Dr. Deborah Bragg. We are an independent research center housed in the College of Education at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Our research spans P20 education and looking at ways that we strengthen pathways in post-secondary education and careers through four main pillars that you see on the slide: public engagement, transformative leadership, equity-driven change, and comprehensive P20 educational pathways. And this particular project, I think, hits on all four of those as we look at equitable transfer pathways, building those in Illinois. We have at OCCRL 9 graduate research assistants and 3 professional staff. And so each of us are part of multiple research teams. So for this project, our research team includes myself as Director of Office of Community College Research and Leadership, also Dr. Janina Baker, who serves as the Associate Director of Evaluation, Learning, and Equitable Assessment at OCCRL. Dr. Baker also brings a wealth of experience from the community college context as both a scholar and a practitioner, particularly in her work with institutional research. And then our lead graduate research assistants on this project, Junsong Wong and Carla Velasco. I just want to say a little bit about both of those, as one of the things we're very proud of at OCCRL is our support of graduate research assistants, particularly as colleagues and emerging scholars in training. And so today you'll have an opportunity to learn from and talk and discuss and dialogue with 2 of our best. Junsong Wong is a graduate research assistant and doctoral student in higher education in the Education Policy Organization and Leadership, EPOL. Future Dr. Wong employs critical quantitative methodology to contribute to underrepresented college students. Junsong also has previous research and professional experience in the Department of Medical Education at Jeju Medical University in South Korea. And again, has developed a strong set of qualitative and quantitative methodologies, as well as an interdisciplinary background from her work in both children development and family studies, as well as human resource development. So we're excited and look forward, and you'll hear a lot of great work from Jun Song. And then Carla Velasco is a graduate research assistant and a doctoral student in global studies in education, also in the Education Policy Organization and Leadership Department here at U of I. Future Dr. Velasco is also a Gates Millennium Scholar, excuse me, a McNair program graduate, and serves in multiple roles, including teaching assistant at the College of Education. Prior to coming to Urbana-Champaign, Carla worked as a social justice advocate for youth of color, particularly in her incredible work on the west side of Chicago. Carla has also worked with families in Mexico and particularly supporting those who have lost someone to feminicide, and provided advocacy services to survivors of domestic violence in Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. So we are honored to have these. I will also say that these are two folks that you should keep your eye on, particularly if you're in a unit that will be looking for future amazing scholars. These are going to be two of the best that we'll see, and I think they'll have a lifelong career in CSCC. So we're excited that they are part of our community here, and that this presentation will be the start of a long time contributions to CSCC. So with that, let me just, before I turn it over to our esteemed colleagues, I just want to present the landscape of our project. So in Illinois, we're actually one of the leading institutions, or excuse me, states, in terms of the percentage of students who transfer out, as well as the percentage of transfer students who complete within 6 years. So our transfer out rate is above the national average at 35%. Those are the percentage of students who transfer out of vertical transfer. And then the 6-year completion rate from the start of their community college matriculation through finishing is 56%, which is above the national average. But as we argued, as well as our colleagues at ICCB and IBHE, is that aggregate success is not equitable success. So while we lead and are above the average in some of these rates, we know that there are communities, and particularly students with identities that fall outside these successful rates. And that particularly low income, Black, Latinx, and non-traditional students have lower odds of both transferring out and completing a 4-year degree after transferring. And so our rationale for this project was to address those issues and making sure that we don't rely on our aggregate success and say we're okay, but that we push through and think about equitable success across the 102 counties that we serve, including the 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. So the next slide. So again, our on this establishing a more equitable vertical transfer pathway, we designed a transfer survey to examine the demographics of both those who are intending the transfer, so those who are coming from uh, those who are currently at the community college, and then those who have successfully transferred. So we had two different surveys there, and my colleagues will talk a little bit more about that. And then our goal was to explore their experiences both as pre-transfer students and those as post-transfer, and considering student background, as well as both their intent to transfer and some of the variables that have shaped that intent and that process, as well as those who had successfully transfer, looking back, what they found as systems of support or challenges. And then, of course, comparing that to the transfer policies we have in Illinois to see if there are ways, based on insights from both these populations, ways that we can improve transfer policies across Illinois. So the next slide before I turn over is just a little bit about our partners. As you can see, this was in collaboration with the Illinois Community College Board and Illinois Board of Higher Education. This was part of our work with the strategic plan for higher education in Illinois that we've collaborated with both ICCB and IBHE on, Thriving Illinois. And so this data was collected between last October and this January. We worked with the both ICCB and IBHE to present out the survey. And as we mentioned, we had two different surveys, a pre-transfer survey, and that was led and sent out and by ICCB, and then the post-transfer survey, which was collected through our collaboration with the Illinois Board of Higher Education. And so with that, I will turn it over to Carla and Junsong, who will lead us through the findings, design, the further design conversation, and then the findings. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baber, and thank you for your kind words. So we'll begin to explain a little bit about the constructs and the grouping variables that we use for both the pre-transfer and the post-transfer survey. So we looked at, we'll get more specific into these, but just to give you a quick overview, there's a couple of different variables that we used. The first kind of big category is engagement with institutional resources. So we're looking at engagement with faculty, academic advising, and then also for transfer assistance centers or transfer centers. And then the other big construct that we have is adjustment. So we're looking at three types of adjustments: psychological adjustment, academic adjustment, and social adjustment. And then when we look at policy, we're looking at access to specific transfer policy and then also familiarity with different policies. A lot of these variables, pretty much all of these variables are measured through a 5 Likert scale, going from 0, which equals to strongly disagree, to 4, which equals to strongly agree. So when we talk a little bit about the means, this is kind of the scale that we're basing that with. And then now looking at the grouping variables, we have first race, which was divided from white and then non-white. And even though this is very problematic because you're kind of aggregating all these different racially minoritized students within non-white, we did this in order to have more statistical significant analyses, since there was a majority of white participants in both the pre-transfer and the post-transfer, which I'll introduce in a little bit. And then our second grouping variable is first generation status. So we have first generation and then continuing generation and family income level, which we divided by low income, middle income, and high income. Now to look a little bit more at our demographics, let's start off by looking at the pre versus post-transfer student demographics. And you can see, just so to give you a little preview of this table, you'll see the pre-transfer demographic statistics on the left and then the post-transfer on the right. We did have more participants for the pre-transfer. So you have 489, and for the post-transfer, we have 313. So that's just to keep in mind in regards to looking at these different demographics. And just to give you a brief overview, we'll begin with the similarities. So both groups are predominantly under the age of 24. Most of them are full-time students, and the majority identified as white and also identify as female. In both groups, you can see that there's a wide range in socioeconomic status, with over 30% reporting family income level above 80,000. Now, looking specifically at the pre-transfer group on the left, you see that nearly 81% of the participants are under the age of 24. Again, the major similarity with the post-transfer group and the fact that a lot of students are full-time, white, and female. For the pre-transfer group, there's also a very limited representation of racially minoritized groups, and the majority of these students live with family or off campus, which indicates the commuter student profile of many community college students. Many of these students also do not work. So you kind of have both sides of the spectrum, where many students reported that they do not work, but also many students reported that they work over 30 hours a week. Now, if we look on the right for the post-transfer group, this group remains mostly traditionally aged, again, under the age of 24, full-time, white, and female. There is a slight increase in Asian American and Asian, Black, Native American students, but representation is still very low. Over 80% of these students live off campus, which challenges common perceptions about housing at four-year institutions. And the employment patterns are, again, very similar to the pre-transfer group, where many students either are not working or working more than 30 hours a week. So in sum, the demographic profiles of both groups are quite similar, though there are small shifts in racial representation and housing. Understanding these patterns helps us better address the unique needs of transfer students. Now looking at the pre-transfer survey findings. Now that we've talked about the different constructs, so let's break these down a little bit. So here we're looking at institutional resources by the different grouping variables. And with institutional resources, we conceptualize this as students' engagement with the 3 dimensions of experience with faculty, academic advising, and transfer assistance center. Adjustment refers to students' affective feelings with community colleges across 3 dimensions: psychological, academic, and social, which I'll get to in the following slide. But just to give you again a reminder, an idea of the 2 primary constructs that we're looking at, the institutional resources and student adjustment. So let's talk about first these institutional resources here. So the 3 grouping variables that we have, again, we have faculty, we have non-white, white, first generation, continuing generation, low, middle income, and high. So if we look at the first figure here, by looking at race, you can see that specifically non-white students have less faculty engagement, very similar to white students. And you can kind of see that the different figures are very similar based on their comparison on the left with non-white and white. And you can see the similarities patterns when it comes to the grouping variable of first generation and continuing generation status, and the similar groupings with low, middle, and high income. The major distinction here that you can see is first generation and continuing generation. There is very slight shifts when it comes to looking at faculty experiences. And then let's move on to adjustment. So now looking at adjustment, which is our second primary construct. Adjustment describes how students feel and adapt emotionally in community colleges, which covers 3 key areas: psychological, academic, and social adjustment. As you can see, a psychological adjustment received the highest ratings with mean scores approaching 3.0, suggesting that students generally feel capable of managing the emotional and mental demands of the pre-transfer period. Academic adjustment fell within the academic adjustment fell within the moderate range, which averages at the mid 2.5 level, which indicates that students encountered some challenges in adapting academically as they prepared for transfer. And then looking at social adjustment, this consistently received lower scores with means closer to 2.2, highlighting that students struggled most with building and sustaining social connections during this transitional stage. And when examining differences by student demographics, race did not produce meaningful variation, as white and non-white students reported similar levels of adjustment across psychological, academic, and social domains. And in contrast, first generation status and family income level were associated with disparities, particularly in psychological adjustment. Continuing generation students reported higher psychological adjustment than their first generation peers, which reflects advantages of having familiarity with college that may provide reassurance during the transfer process. And similarly, students from middle and high income backgrounds reported stronger psychological adjustment than those from low income backgrounds, underscoring how financial security can increase students' confidence and reduce stress in navigating the transfer process. Notably, these differences were not observed in academic or social adjustment, where challenges appear to be shared across these different groups. Now I will hand it over to Jung-san, who will discuss the post-transfer survey findings.
Thank you so much, Carla. I will share the survey research about the experiences of post-transfer students at their current institution. First, here, institutional resource mean scores for each group. The scale is the same as the data of pre-transfer survey. Specifically, academic advising remained the area where students were most actively engaged after transfer, with only a slight decrease from pre-transfer level. On the other hand, Faculty interaction remained the lowest among all categories, consistent with the pre-transfer level. And the last thing is that the use of Transfer Assistance Center declined notably after transfer, marking the largest drop among the areas. When looking at differences based on student background, the only statistically significant region was that low-income and first-generation students showed higher engagement with the Transfer Assistance Center than their counterparts. This suggests that these students, those with less experience at four-year institutions and less financial support, they are making greater efforts to engage with institutional support services. And let's look at how post-transfer students adjust to their current institution. The first thing we observe is that the overall adjustment level among a post-transfer student is lower than among post-transfer student. And it is at a low to moderate level, considering that the total score is out of 4. Among the 3 types of adjustment, psychological adjustment was highest at 2.4, while academic and social adjustment they were around 2.0. So post-transfer students still require more organized, structured, comprehensive institutional support after transferring, which includes the 3 domains: psychological, social, and academic adjustment. This is what four-year institutions should keep in mind. And let's look at student background differences. Regarding psychological adjustment, non-white and first-generation students consistently reported lower scores than their peers. Although the gaps were not statistically significant, they were still point to practical or marginal differences that matter. In other words, we should not assume there are no differences at all. Four-year institutions should keep in mind that non-white and first-generation transfer students may face greater psychological challenges after transfer. And family income level showed statistically significant differences in psychological adjustment as well. Low-income students reported lower levels of psychological adjustment compared to high-income students, suggesting that financial status may be able to influence post-transfer students' mental health and their well-being. And interestingly, first-generation status showed the opposite pattern for social adjustment. First-generation students reported higher social adjustment than their counterparts. While this is only one data point, it may be related to the fact that first-generation students interacted more with institutional resources, as we discussed earlier in the previous slide, and may have benefit from peer or community support within their first-generation networks. And the last thing is that academic adjustment was generally low to moderate across all student groups. This pattern indicates that four-year institutions should continue to strengthen learning support system for their transfer students. And excuse me. The final section discusses how Illinois students perceive and experience transfer policies. In Illinois, 5 main policies support vertical transfer between institutions. All of these policies are designed to help students transfer smoothly between colleges and universities. Broadly, they fall into 2 categories. The first one is articulation-based policies, which include the Illinois Articulation Initiative, Compact Agreements, and Articulation Agreements. The IAI is a statewide articulation agreement that guarantees the transfer of a core set of general education courses among participating participating institutions. And compact agreements and articulation agreements are both articulation-based, but a little bit different. Compact agreements is much more geographical bounded, but articulation agreements are between two specific institutions, and they define certain specific clear pathway into certain programs or degree. And the second category is individualized tool, including MyCredit transfer and course-to-course transfer evaluation. MyCredit transfer is a web-based tool that helps students see how their earned credits will transfer between institutions. And course-to-course transfer evaluation is usually used when a course is not listed in MyCredit transfer or not covered by any of the articulation-based agreements. So in this survey, we used two constructs, familiarity and access. Familiarity refers to how much a student know about transfer policies, and access captures how actively they seek out transfer information. So familiarity reflects student awareness and understanding, but access represents their information-seeking behavior. So when we compared these two measures, an interesting patterns emerged. Both pre-transfer and post-transfer students showed higher level of access than familiarity. This means that regardless of whether they have transferred or not yet, they are actively looking for transfer information, but they may not always fully understand or utilize what they found. So this suggests that the current communication channel about transfer information in Illinois need more improvements to help students not just find information, but also understand it and apply it more accurately and more effectively. And lastly, we looked at where students find their transfer information and how these patterns differ between pre-transfer and post-transfer stages. Two main findings emerged. First, across both groups, the most common response was no sources. Specifically, the number of students without any source to transfer information outnumbered those with at least one information source. As noted in the figures like here, a considerable number of students indicated that they had no transfer source at all. Second, when students did report using information sources, the patterns differed significantly. Pre-transfer students often rely on a single source and typically search for information on their own. On the other hand, post-transfer students tend to use multiple sources and more frequently sought help from community college advisors who are generally reliable institutional agents. So these findings reveal a clear gap. Pre-transfer students usually depend on just one main source, while post-transfer students have access to a broader range of information. This matters because multiple institution-based sources are linked to a better transfer outcomes and more accurate information that may help transfer success. So therefore, providing information, transfer information through diverse and multiple and reliable institutional channels can better support their students' transfer journeys rather than expecting them to search on their own. Yeah, so for now, I will hand it over to Dr. Baber for the last section.
Great, thanks. So some of our recommendations that we encouraged, and again, this is work what we did with the Illinois Community College Board and the Illinois Board of Higher Education. We presented this both in to the governor's office as well as to state legislators, particularly those who are on the educational committee at the House and Senate, State Senate and State House. So next slide kind of reviews some of the recommendations. First, thinking through the integrated student success program. So we know that vertical transfer is just one component of the transfer process across the K-12 K-20 spectrum. So we know that vertical transfer, dual credit, for example, on the K-12 side has a unique influence on vertical transfers, of course. And so thinking through, the degree to which student who has access to dual credit, the degree to which dual credit is built out for transfer to the community college, and then give space for more opportunities as they build their transfer credits to the four-year institution is something to consider, as well as reverse transfer, which I think a couple of days ago we saw an article in I think it was the Chronicle or maybe it was the other piece. One of the Inside Higher Ed about reverse transfer, and we see that also as important. So not thinking just the ways in which four-year institutions benefit from a stronger transfer process, but the ways in which we can help support completion rates at community colleges, particularly for those groups of students who may leave and transfer before they gain a credential at the community college. And so the idea of reverse transfer as part of an integrated student success program at the state level. We also recommended and encouraged to build social network among peers and alumni. Again, highlighting that finding that that friends and family are a strong support system for transfer. We know from other research that really, particularly those who come from under-resourced communities, rely on that networking a little bit more. So thinking about whether you're from Pilsen or which is in West Side Chicago, or Rend Lake or Decatur, that really having somebody who from your community advocating and providing reliable information is very important. So even beyond the formal institutional agent, that these, so the idea is to kind of build these informal networks more formally, so that students who have aspirations to transfer have role models from their community that they can look to and gain some information and insight on. We also recommended strengthen the role and training of academic advisors and evening out that role and training. So we know, particularly in under-resourced community colleges, that their advising loads might be very heavy. And so the idea of considering that, as well as strengthening the conversations that and space that academics have or advisors have. So we know that transfer is not just a technical process, but it's also a developmental process. So thinking through how we infuse that in the role and training of academic advisors is important. And then establishing a statewide student-friendly communication platform for transfer information. Our argument there is that while programs like IAI and other articulation agreements are very strong for institution-to-institution communication, they're less strong in terms of institution-to-student communication. So how do we build more student friendliness in the communication platforms, even within some of the programs that have been established? And then, of course, building a strategic partnership, getting past the silos that we see with community college and four-year institutions, as well as the role of state agencies. So two recommendations we made. One little controversial, to be admitted, is the common course numbering, which we feel like, and from the research that is out there, that common course numbering has a unique and positive effect on transfer rates, particularly those from underserved communities. And so thinking through the ways in which Illinois can think through, I think California was the last state to went through this process, Missouri as well. So we know this is a multi-year process. We know it's very confusing. We also know there's some other options, like common course numbering could look like a shared unique number that's cross-listed. So it doesn't necessarily mean having to align all 48 community colleges and 14 public universities with the same common course numbering, but identifying a common course, a shared unique number that can be cross-listed along all those catalogs. So although we are arguing that we think the lift of a common course numbering across the state is worth the investment. And then finally, our gold standard should be, no matter where you start whether you start at a community college or a four-year institution, that once you accumulate 123 credits, that should be you should be lined up to earn a bachelor's degree. So we call it 123 no matter where you start, and making sure that and that takes a lot more alignment. And this is where IAI kind of falls short currently, where it does foster credit accumulation and efficiency of credit, but not necessarily aligns with the requirements of upper class. So students may come in with the full 60 credits, but still need 65 to 70 more credits to finish their bachelor's degree because they don't have prerequisites or other requirements that go beyond the credits that they transfer into. So we're making an argument that 123, no matter where you start, should be the gold standard, and that any student that has more of those credits because of the lack of articulation agreement or lack of connection, that cost should be absorbed by the institution and not the individual. Because if the individual has done everything that they were supposed to do in terms of that transfer, they should be able to finish a bachelor's degree in those 123. They should not be community college students should not be uniquely penalized for starting their post-secondary pathway at a community college and having to earn more degrees than those who start out at four-year institution. This is particularly for areas like all areas, but particularly for areas like in social services. For us in the College of Education, teaching education, teacher ed should be that. We should not have students who have 130, 140 credits trying to finish a teacher ed degree just because they started out at community college. And we also know that institutions are going to be looking at transfer students in the wake of the 2023 Supreme Court decision on undergraduate admissions and the unique use of race. They'll be looking at transfer students to continue equity goals and diversity goals, but that's not enough to have students come into this institution but still be uniquely penalized because of the lack of conversation or articulation in these pathways. So that's where we are. Those are the recommendations we made. I think the Common Course numbering is in the legislative session for this year, so we'll see where that goes. I know reverse transfer has been a conversation that's ongoing among the state agencies as well, and we will continue to push. The 123 credits haven't gained much traction in our state level policy, but we're pushing that in our institutional level policy, even starting with our own College of Education and doing an assessment of the number of degrees that transfer students accumulate upon graduation, and seeing how we can, if those are above, how we can reduce those. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Baker, who will lead us through some Q&A.
Thank you all. A lot to chew on for sure. I'd like to invite you to ask your question if you have one for the presenters. You can either ask it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask directly. There is a question: what role or connection does the Illinois Direct Admit one-click initiative with the Common App partnership have in this discussion? It's a good question. Dr. Baber, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I think it will have some influence. We want to see a little bit more of how that works out, particularly across the different institutions. So for those who are not familiar, Illinois is starting a direct admissions policy statewide using the Common App, so students can apply to multiple institutions, and then there's a guaranteed transfer process there. Again, I think that helps with admissions and with that first level transfer, but the degree, again, that the direct admit really attunes to that accumulation of credits is still something that I think is under considered. So admitting a student and admitting them as a transfer student and guaranteeing that admission doesn't necessarily guarantee the efficiency of the credits that they'll transfer to. And again, like our institution here at the University of Illinois, I think we're about 90% of the credits transfer to the institution. So again, that credit accumulation is strong in terms of the percentage. Although, you know, you could argue that 10% is still a lot. If you're talking about 60 credits, that's like 6 credits. And given our cost per credit hour, that's still a lot of money that students are losing. However, regardless, it does not guarantee that that credit will be applied so that students have, you know, junior year status or upper class status comparable to their colleagues who start out at the 4-year institution. And I'm not sure, and Devin, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have more information, that direct admit really addresses that concern.
Sounds like an interesting research study for someone, you know, as we are embarking in direct admissions within the state. There will be a lot to learn from it. So I hope that there's someone, not just us, paying attention to some of these transfer conversations, but also willing to document and research what potential direct admissions does have. I noticed that Carla posed a question to all of you. You know, is there anything that we should be thinking about with this work as we move forward? And any other qualitative, quantitative directions that you thought might be missing that might lead us to some different discussions? Anything anyone would like to jump in and say or ask? Manuel, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I work at the City College of Chicago, and right now we're focused on a project that kind of emphasizes that piece that you all talked about with the credit loss between institutions. So I know that's like a huge area of interest for us, and just trying to make sure students don't have to repeat courses once they transfer and don't have to pay extra for a bachelor's, given the you know, the cost benefit that we sell to them when coming to a community college. So I think, you know, if you all do any analyses that are Illinois specific, I know we have like the national average of how many credits are lost, but I know in Illinois, I think it's a little bit lower. So if you all have that qualitative or quantitatively, I'd love to kind of dig into that data so that we can maybe extrapolate where Chicago public school students fall.
Yeah, I'll defer to Carla and Junsong, but I know we'd love to work with city colleges on kind of the qualitative aspect, the insights on that. I know that city colleges has a strong relationship with, is particularly with UIC, and that transfer articulation and using some of the technology to help students think through like multiple pathways, starting their first year. And, you know, if you take this class this semester, it will transfer to this. And I think it's the analytics that are part of it, which I think is really, really strong. And so I think replicating that across the state will be important, but I also think it's important to think about qualitatively, you know, what are some of the experiences that students are having, particularly, again, as I mentioned, you know, I think there's two sides of transfer. There's the technical side, like what your credits will transfer to, how they'll transfer, but there's also that developmental side as well. And so the degree to which we balance that out in those conversations, I think is important as well. So Emmanuel, thanks for those comments. Which city college are you at? Or are you at the system office?
I'm at the system office.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we'll get your name and we'll reach out. So I don't know, Carla, Junsong, do you have any additional insights on that?
While they think, I also want to put a plug in. I think, Dr. Baber, you termed this credit efficiency, and wanting to kind of push into that space as well. So I wonder, you know, what could be made of credit loss, credit efficiency, and if we could maybe start to explore not just using those terms, but what that actually means on campuses, to connect both the 2 years and 4 years. That could assist us and primarily assist students. Carla Johnson, go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's really important in terms of looking at the data that we got from the pre-transfer survey. We had like very small, tiny, like less than 10 participants who were actually from city colleges. So we don't have much data on city colleges specifically, but I mean, Jungsan and I are both very happy to work together in terms of trying to see and doing more research and data analysis and what types of studies would be helpful, particularly to be able to help students avoid credit loss, especially Chicago public school students. So we're happy to work together, but we don't have much data as of right now, unfortunately.
Excellent. Holly. Oh, go ahead, Jiangsu. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. To add on that, actually, we have some difficulties in collecting institutional data regarding credits, the number of credits. So yeah, with your support, it would be great research opportunity, to make our the credit transfer system for Illinois. Yeah, thank you so much.
I'll definitely reach out and, try to see how we can collaborate. I think data sharing is a big piece of our agreement with UIC. And then as we onboard new partners to this quote unquote zero credit loss pathway, it'll be a big piece. So someone to analyze that data with, the person power to analyze that would definitely be helpful. Thank you so much.
Keep us in mind for sure. Definitely some interest there. Holly, I noticed you came off camera. I'm guessing you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, question/comment. So, hi, I'm Holly Flume. I'm an assistant director with Transfer Outreach and Initiatives with the U of I System Office. So I work with all 3 of the University of Illinois locations. Our office, long before I had even joined it, did a transcript study to look at not only course transferability, but also degree applicability. And the most recent findings, which was I think 4 years ago now at this point in time, found that across the system, 87% of classes that transferred also directly applied to a student's degree. Obviously, certainly, like Dr. Baber said, work to be done, improvements to be made. So that's something that we continue to do. We're actually in discussions about starting that study again with another sample. But I also just wanted to mention, if anybody saw it in Inside Higher Ed about a month ago, there were a couple articles about this very thing. And a lot of it, they talked about a student's journey and a community college student's path to changing majors as being an important component of degree applicability once they do transfer. And then just how important the advising role is in that situation. A lot of students self-advise at the community college. So just various things in play here that we also found similarly in the transcript study. Students who wanted to take on minors or dual degrees that would end up being excess credit as well. So just a lot of nuances, dual enrollment, as we talked about earlier, I think all important components to consider moving forward too. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thanks, Holly, and good to see you. And thanks for your work with the system office. Again, I think, our argument here is we're doing well. And now the next step is how do we go do well deeper, right? How do we get from that 87, which is strong, to the 100%? How do we make sure that that 87 is applied across all, degree programs, across all demographics? So this is, an era where it's not like we're operating from a huge deficiency, but we don't want to be comfortable where we are, and that we're digging deeper. And so I think the system office is a great example of that. I would also give a great shout out to ICCB and IBHE for supporting this, the governor's office for making this a priority as part of their administration, because I think what we all agree in Illinois is that we're not satisfied with being good. We want to be better, and we want to be better for all the 102 counties that we have the pleasure of serving. And that's really our metric, and also learning from other states, right? And also understanding that, maybe Common Course numbering isn't the thing for Illinois, and that's fine, but at least have a conversation, work that through, and other metrics we've talked about as well. But I think we're in a place now, especially in this era, where I'm proud to be in Illinois. I'm proud to be across folks that we have with Emmanuel and Holly as examples, and others on this call. I see Marcy here, that we can really be the marker so that, 20 or 30 years from now, people are like, they didn't rest on their laurels. They kept going. And they actually created this program that now everybody benefits from, or a wider group benefits from. And that's where we're at, because I do believe that if we can get the transfer, if we can get better on our transfer, that's the domino that we don't have to worry as much about kind of what comes down at the federal level in terms of, Supreme Court decisions around equity. We don't have to think about, unless we have a structure in place to think about these other avenues of broadening participation across different types of fields. So when we think about, for example, teacher education, which I'm very passionate about, or nursing is another area where we know we're going to have a shortage, that if we have if we have these transfer pathways in place, that's the domino where we're like, well, in Illinois, they don't have that big of a problem because their teacher education, is very diverse in nursing and all these other areas. And there's a path that people can see to get to those degrees, and get to those degrees in areas where they don't have a lot of, student loans or other faults that might limit their aspirations or their ability to move forward or their ability to reinvest in their community. So it's definitely it's a challenge, but I think it's a place where, we're in a good position to do this. And I always say to me, it's like everybody talks about California in the 1960s and how they were kind of progressive and forward thinking. Illinois is going to be that in the 2050s. Like, we're going to be the one where people look back and say, man, how did Illinois do this? Because they didn't rest on their laurels, and they didn't kind of coward in this moment. They moved forward. So I know that's a soapbox moment. I get on those a little bit, but seeing the people on this call, especially those of us in the state, I think this is our moment to shine. And so that's what we're going with.
Well, I was going to add points, but you just kept on going, and it
Oh,
was
I know. I'm
perfect.
sorry.
It was
Yeah,
no,
no,
it was
yeah.
it
Too much
was
coffee. Yeah.
no, it was really good. It was very thoughtful, and I think if you leave with anything, yes, we are a leader within transfer, and we want to continue to grow. And many of the pieces that have already been put in place as we've had these discussions over the past couple of years, we are like, "Oh, wow, like it was before its time." And now in many ways we need some of those pieces to kind of come to complement it, like with IAI, right, to make it more student friendly, or transferology, or whatever it might be, right? We
Mhm.
definitely need those pieces to support the really good work, the thoughtful work that people have put in place, because they also saw some of these issues um, whenever IAI and the other pieces were started. So come along with us for sure. Anything else? We have a few minutes remaining. If not, I believe, did you put the email addresses on the screen, Johnson? If not, um, please do feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your own work. And we've already thought about some ways that we can connect and collaborate with a few of you. So if it comes up and you read a piece or something comes to mind, please do contact us. We'd love to hear from you and think about what the possibilities are, especially around transfer. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, I just want to finally say thank you to the Council for the Study of Community Colleges, Raina, as well as the director, Dr. Ebony Zamana Gallagher, for your support in allowing us to present this research project. We look forward, hopefully, to seeing everyone at CSCC in March. I don't know, I want to steal your thunder, Raina, but and also a shout out to Carla and Jen Song for their incredible work. Let me tell you this, we had an idea about this policy, this transfer survey, and they just went with it. Janina will tell you that we just got, every 2 weeks we got an update, and all of a sudden we had a survey, and then we had a plan for a sample, and and it was great. So I just want to give a shout out to Carla and Jen Song, and also to say, for those of you in Illinois, one of the things we want to do is keep great talent in our state. So, and Carla and Jen Song are two of those folks. So as they get through their program, and you have opportunities, please think of all our graduates, but particularly these two. They are amazing. This is their survey. We just provided some resources. So yeah, I want to say that, and then hopefully we'll be able to see everyone in Salt Lake next spring.
Okay, So thanks again to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to OCCRL for sharing this work with us. I'll close with a couple of quick CSCC reminders. Our call for proposals for the 2026 CSCC conference is out and available. It's on our website at cscc.pitt.edu. We're accepting submissions through November 3rd, which is coming up, so get those proposals in. The conference will be held in Salt Lake City, April 2nd through 4th, 2026. We're also accepting nominations for the 2026 CSCC Awards, and that call for nominations can also be found on our website. And last but not least, and you all are hearing it here first, conference registration is now open. So head over to the annual conference page on our website and register. And we hope to see you in Salt Lake City in the spring. Thank you.